Welcome to the filming of the first ever hybrid attorney podcast. We are your hosts, Devin Thorpe and Austin Marler. I am Devin Thorpe.
And I'm Austin Marler.
There we go. We are two attorneys practicing family law in the state of North Carolina. And just briefly, I will share the disclaimer. We are both employed at King Law offices, and the views and opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and shared for general discussion and educational purposes only. They do not reflect the views of our law firm, our colleagues, our clients, or any organizations in which we are affiliated with. Now that that disclaimer is out of the way, Austin, would you like to introduce yourself to the -2 people that are watching currently?
I believe the only people that will be watching this are ourselves. So, my name is Austin Marler. As Devin just said, I'm an attorney at King Law offices practicing in the area of family law. Uh, I didn't always want to be an attorney. My background is in history, and then I coached baseball in college for a little bit. But I've ended up here. So excited to be part of this podcast with Devin. We went to the same college, went to the same law school, and we luckily ended up at the same firm. And decided we wanted to have a platform to just talk like we do on a daily basis anyway. So I'll hand it back over to you, Devin.
And I don't think it's just us, because I don't think it's just us that are going to be watching this, because I plan on sending it to your mom to watch. I think Carla will be very supportive of your endeavors, building your personal brand. To go off of that, we did go. So, a short story about us: we went to the same undergrad college where I played lacrosse and he played baseball, and the population size at the school was like high school. There was like 1,000, maybe 1,200 people that went to this college, and both knew each other. In fact, uh, at the same time that he had gotten surgery on his elbow, I had gotten surgery on my knee, and we both were ordered to go to pool rehab at the same time. Um, and we did not say like a single word to each other throughout this entire time, uh, the 4 years that we were in college. And it just so happened that the timing of our lives, we both took a 2-year gap period and then ended up going to the same law school. And I saw that he was going, and I was like, damn, I never talked to him in college, but I guess if we're going to be going to the same law school, we might as well become friends. So that's kind of how our friendship started. And after law school, we ended up at the same law firm, and we're both doing family law. So anything to add to that?
Please don't send this to my mom, or it's going to end up on Facebook.
And that what? And then Judy's going to see it, and um,
Who knows?
just
There's going to be a comment from my grandmother saying that's my grandson, and then it's just going to go downhill from there.
I'm definitely sending it to her then. So Austin, you can add to this in a second, but I just wanted to briefly share the mission statement that I've written down for this podcast to explain. Mostly because there's anyone with a camera and a mic, so essentially anyone with a phone can have a podcast these days, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. I think it leads to a lot of content being released that probably didn't need to be made in the first place, and it also leads to a lot of very educational and valuable information being put on the internet. And so, with that being said, I get that listening to any podcast regularly consumes time, and time is money, time is valuable. It's the only thing we can't get back in this world. I want to share our mission statement because if you are listening, then we appreciate that, and I want you to kind of know what value we plan on bringing to the table, so that way you'll know if this is a podcast that is right for you to listen to. We are two practicing attorneys exploring life, discipline, power, systems, and human behavior through the lens of the law, not to teach law, but to analyze how the world actually works. And so going off of that, we're not here to talk about our cases, to tell you how to file a complaint for divorce, or get out of a traffic ticket, although those subjects might come up at times. We're not here to give you a de facto Juris Doctorate. We're here to just talk about talk about life, talk about experiences, but to talk about them analytically and from the lenses of two currently practicing attorneys in the state of North Carolina. Um, and I hope that that can bring some sort of, benefit to your personal life, because these skills that we've acquired in law school and as practicing attorneys can be applicable to every area of your life, whether you work in retail or you're a hostess or you currently don't have a job. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Seems like you covered it, just about everything there. And by no means is this us acting like we know how the world works exactly. All we can do is speak to how we see it and how we analyze it. And we're still trying to figure out our way through it, to the area of the law, and then just also working through this time of our late 20s, because Devin is now officially 28 as of today. Want
As
to
of
shout
today, um, yeah, and I think that there is a misconception that attorneys know better, or that their advice or opinion is um, superior to anyone else's. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think another thing that this podcast is going to bring to light is attorneys are just as human as anyone else. I mean, like we don't. There's nothing that makes other than our education, but the we're just as human. We make mistakes. We're not perfect all the time, and um, we're just people who want to be there in our communities and advocate for our clients, but that doesn't mean that we have all the answers or the right answers. A lot that is essentially our job, is trying to find the right answers and make an argument for why we think that that is the right answer. But at the end of the day, it's not always there's not always a clear cut correct answer. There's a lot of gray areas, and so, we're not perfect, we're fallible, we mess up, but we try our best, and I think that's something that our content will shed a little bit of light on. First thing, so this is just our introductory episode. It's going to be, kind of dry cut, bare bones. I'll talk a little bit about what our future episodes will consist of, but before that, Austin, I wanted you to briefly explain how you think how you think an ordinary person that doesn't practice law, never went to law school, how it could be potentially useful for them to use legal thinking to kind of decode life and just the experiences that any average person is going to experience.
I guess from my perspective, one thing that, since attending law school, one thing I've gotten, either for better or for worse, I think of things, and I'm on the fence for a lot of things. I don't lean too heavily one way. I don't lean too heavily the other way, because going to law school, you learn to be able to see one side of the story, but also in seeing that side of the story, you're able to see your own weaknesses in that position, and you have to try and predict what the other side's strengths or weaknesses of their position would be. So one thing that law school probably taught me, and how to analyze just the world as I see it, is not everything is going to be a black or white. There's going to be a lot of gray. You're going to be able to make sides, or make a decision and take a position on anything, but you're also able to recognize your own weaknesses and able to adapt to understand other context that comes in and can influence and then change that original position that you took on a certain stance. And
So
you
so
always have to,
apply that to a non law school or like legal case. Apply that to a real life experience that has nothing to do with the law, just off the dome.
having to see two sides of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, half the conversation that you and I have on just about any topic, whether it's legal related, political related, sports related, even, like you have to understand, you have to be willing to listen to what the other person's saying, take it in, analyze what they're saying, see what point of view they're coming from, and then try and tailor what you're saying back to help them understand. So even more so than having to take a position and adapt, like you've got to learn how to listen to people daily, whether it's a client, whether it's one of your friends, whether it's someone from your family, and then tailor your response to where they're going to understand what you're saying, but also tailor your response to be what they need to hear. It's kind of how I can't give you a specific example of something that we've talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'd probably get fired if you did, so
I always tell everyone, like, you and I, if there's anything where one of us has to take a position, there's about a 99% certainty that you and I end up on the opposite side of it, regardless of how small it is. So,
yeah, and and that's, I don't know, I mean, if anything, in my mind, it just goes to show that all of the resentment or animosity that we see in something like politics or religion these days, um, is kind of unnecessary because you and I, we're not like polar opposites, but very rarely, I mean, I can't even count on two hands the number of times that you've taken a position and I've taken the opposite position just just for us to fact check it or get an answer and to learn that I'm the one that's wrong, and we're just still friends. Like, we just keep rolling on, and that's kind of something that is missing in society today. Not only the ability to fact check or to um, seek answers or to not accept what people are telling you as just surface value truth, but to
push back.
also know how to admit when you're wrong.
It's like even something as small as the correct way to play words with friends, we don't even agree on.
Yeah, well, it's if you play words with friends, I'm pretty new to the world of Scrabble, and I was undefeated in Scrabble until last night when the right word is not cheated, but the way that he composes himself in a game of Scrabble, it's selfish. It's it's just not right. I try to use words that will expand the board and help facilitate the game and move towards triple words or double words or whatever. And Austin is a leech that just suctions on onto the words that I use, um, and I really can't explain it with words without showing a picture of it, but if you've played Scrabble, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He just leeches onto the side of my words, trying to get, the most amount of points in the fewest letters used. He could actually probably get, like, a Guinness World Record for doing that so many times, but
I've heard people are calling it a defensive masterclass is what I've been putting on it. That's what the people
it's
are.
people are calling it something. I don't know if they're calling it that though. Yeah, I it's easy to sit here and say though that, you know, using an analytical or a legal way of thinking would make this world a better place. But at the end of the day, I think people have a generally negative view of lawyers or attorneys. I myself had a negative view of lawyers and attorneys before law school, and I actually did not even want to go to law school. And I'll talk about that experience at some point. Um, but Austin, how do you think the world generally sees attorneys? How do you think that it views them now in 2026?
You're gonna fall into one of two categories if I had to guess. On one side, you're gonna be think negative, grimy people, people that just try to that are morally gray, try to skirt their way around the law. Personally, maybe even like they have the idea of a bulldog attorney in mind, someone that just goes and yells and diminishes people. Or you're going to be in the other bucket, I guess I'll put you in, and where your only thoughts of lawyers are suits, where you've seen the show Suits and you think everything is so quick paced. This is the coolest job on the road, make tons of money. I don't see people getting a realistic view of what an attorney is because it's always either the grimiest of the grimy or the richest of the rich Harvey Specters.
Yeah, it's like the classic Saul Goodman or Harvey Specter without
Hmm.
like any in between. And like I said, I didn't necessarily, prior to going to law school, I didn't think all attorneys were were Saul Goodmans, but I was raised in a family where my father would oftentimes make this joke in winter where he would say, you know, it it's so cold out today that earlier I saw an attorney with his hands in his own pocket. And I think that kind of summarizes, like just the societal belief that attorneys are these money hungry. Uh, I don't even know, but I relate to it because that's how I saw them. And it wasn't until going to law school and then practicing for a while that I learned from just practical and real life experience that a lot of the attorneys um, that I work with, not only are they not like that, um, but B, even the attorneys outside of our firm, like opposing counsels, people that I'm essentially, going to war with are not like that. And so, although I will say there are some opposing counsels that Austin can probably, um, he would probably agree with me when I say this. There are some opposing counsels that I guess they must have missed an ethics class or two in law school.
I'd agree.
Yeah. So a couple of just general, there's no way that I can lay out everything that we're ever going to talk about on this podcast, but generally speaking, we have plans to discuss things, all kinds of things that are not even related to the law. So, talking about real world events. Like I was thinking about dedicating an entire episode to Austin and I going through a portion of the recently released Epstein files, and I thought that that would be, not only fun for us, well, not fun because a lot of the stuff that are in those files is deeply concerning to humanity and morality. But even with that being said, I think that getting an attorney's perspective on those files and what was happening could be, something that people might want insight into. Um, so real world events, current trials going on that are featured in popular media, but also discussing things like AI and how it's being used in the legal field and whether or not lawyers should be using it. Discussing social media and how that's used in the legal field. And then, there's a lot of insight that I think we can give into just general, like the topics of workflow, which is applicable in every single profession, maximizing your ability to get work done, get quality work done, but still have a life outside of work and to be able to have a family and pursue your personal passions. And so talking about workflow, productivity, like Austin said, he is a prior history major and he can give insight into past historical figures that were attorneys like Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, Clarence Thomas. So, Austin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, like said at the intro, my background's in history, so that's always something I've been interested in. I like the I like just seeing how history continues to repeat itself and affects the future. So looking at things through that lens is always interesting to me, even looking at things such as like ancient civilizations, going back to Rome, Greece, and seeing how their models of the legal field and ethics have continued to affect things today and how long lasting of an impact that has had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So yeah, that it's just to go back to the mission statement. We're not here to teach you the law. We're not here to teach you how to file and what to file and how to win your case. We're here to just, talk about life, but to do so from a legal lens, from our own experiences. Um, we've prepared 3 questions each to ask each other, and then we'll wrap up the introductory episode. Um, so I'll ask 3 questions to Austin. Austin will ask 3 questions to me. And Austin, if you, I think it'd probably be best if we just go back and forth. And I'll start with mine. Neither one of us have prepared answers to these questions, so the answers that we do give will be just straight from the heart and out of the head. So, Austin, when did you realize law wasn't just law; it was human nature?
early on, I guess as soon as I got any sort of practical experience, I guess it could go all the way back to my first summer internship. It was at a firm who does election and political law, and most of our interactions were more so interactions with people. That's essentially what we were just talking to people every day, day in, day out. And then after that, I obviously interned for someone that practiced in the area of family law. And that just only emphasized that it's more so just legal stuff. It's more human nature. You got to figure out how to connect to your client. You got to figure out how to talk to a judge. You got to figure out how to talk to an opposing counsel. You got to figure out how to talk to an opposing party that's pro se. If you're doing something like a jury trial, you've got to figure out how to paint your story in a way that makes 12 other individuals believe what you're saying and see your client in the best light. So the law is important. Ultimately, the law isn't applied perfectly in every scenario. You've got to kind of tailor it to the individual person, the individual client, the individual situation that you're in. So it's much more than just being able to read a statute, put that to a set of facts, because that's not always going to be the exact decision that's reached or what's best for a family, what's best for a kid.
Yeah. And I can't tell you, I mean, I do a lot of consults. I can't tell you how many consults I've done where someone has tried to represent themselves and, they say, "Man, I went to court and I tried telling the judge my side of the story and he or she wasn't hearing me out. They didn't let me show them any of my documents, any of my evidence, blah blah blah." And it didn't go well for me or whatever language they used. It was probably more aggressive than that. And the thing I always go back to is like the law is not just a system. It's a game, and you've got to know how to play this game. You've got to know how to keep yourself fully composed in court and out of court. How to, you know, remain productive under pressure and not let your human nature get the best of you. And when I say human nature, I mean like your emotions, the thoughts that are running through your head, um, the the stress of the entire situation. Because if you're going to court, I can guarantee you it's not for something happy. I mean, unless you're getting eloped, that's probably the only time you'll ever go to court for like a joyous occasion. If it's not elopement, then it means that you're either getting divorced or you've been charged with a traffic ticket or you're having to probate a will for the loss of a loved one. So it's never good. But um at the end of the day, it's about divorcing yourself from the emotion of it, from the thoughts going through your head, and being able to stay composed.
That actually leads me into my first question for you, Devin. Why most conflicts are emotional and not logical?
Pretty much exactly what I just said. It's like, I mean, I guess I can use a real life experience. It's the same reason why when my task list, so let's say that I log on to start work at 8 a.m. and I look at my tasks and I've got 10 things overdue or 10 things in the red and just a huge mountain of work that I need to get done. And it's so much so to the point where it's debilitating or paralyzing. I can't even like muster the motivation or the energy to start because I don't know where to start, and that just sets me back even further. And so that's an emotional response. The logical side of my brain, if I was able to channel it, would say, okay, this is your most important task. This has priority over everything else. Start here and slowly move your way forward. But the emotional side is, you know, in the back of my head, I'm saying, oh God, my dog woke me up at 3 a.m. to let him out, which actually does happen at times. I barely slept last night. I haven't had enough caffeine today. Like, I'm just so overwhelmed. I've got this trial tomorrow, and how am I supposed to focus on all these other cases when I need to prep for this trial? It, I'm giving myself PTSD just talking about this because it's so true, and it's so true in so many other jobs other than just being a lawyer. The medical field, you know, being a manager of anything, whether it's retail or construction, you have so many choices in the day that you have to make, and there's a certain amount of fatigue that comes with every single decision you make, to the point where by the time 5 o'clock hits, you're just exhausted. Um, and so I think it's just natural as humans uh, to let the emotional side of things win out, because at the end of the day, we're not robots. If we are, if we were, then all of our decisions would be made logically. There would be no need to even end up in court or to sue one another, because it would be a perfectly perfect world that we live in. But we're not logical 100% of the time. Um, a lot of our poor decision making skills result from emotions. And I can't tell you whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because I think emotion is necessary, and this world would be very dystopian without it. But at the same time, it does get us in trouble every now and again.
Based off that, I'm actually going to double up on you and ask a second question because it feels like a good segue.
Gonna give me the old double team.
Oh my God. Uh, why being right is often a losing strategy.
Why being logical is a losing
Be,
strategy?
being right.
Being right. Okay. At the end of the day, and this is a book that I believe that you are reading um currently, or that we're going to be discussing on this podcast at some point, but the feeling of being right is a good feeling, but at the end of the day, it's a feeling that stems somewhat from ego. And so um for example, I'm engaged to get married. For I'm saying this for the viewers. Austin already knows that. Um, I'm getting married later this year, and as a part of the invitations that we sent out for this wedding, um, we put in the RSVP a section for people to give us marital advice. And one person put in the advice, your life will be much happier and your marriage will be healthier if you just learn that your wife is always right. And it's said kind of as a joke, but at the end of the day, um, even when you are right, you don't always have to be right. And some of the most high conflict divorces, custody battles, financial marriage cases that I've dealt with, the conflict is coming from neither party being willing to set aside their ego, and because of their inability to uh, humble themselves or accept anything less than what they think is right, is what leads to the case being so contentious. And even though it's nice to feel right, it's it's not always the right thing to be right all of the time. And especially when you're dealing with a custody case, and your kids' lives are being dragged through the mud alongside you and your spouse because you can't get along with each other. Being right isn't what is important all the time. In cases like that, your children are more important than you being right. And so it's a losing strategy, because a lot of the times it's fueled by ego, and living your life with your ego being the priority is it's just not conductive to living a happy life. Um, the next question I had for you was, I feel like the two that you've asked are super deep, and this next one is like a first date asking what someone's favorite color is. It says, "What surprised you most about practicing?"
What surprised me most about practicing? I mean, seemingly at the beginning, everything almost seemed like a surprise. Like all the different issues that could come up, all the different sorts of conversations I'm having to have, all the different ways I'm having to interact with clients. Uh, and honestly, I guess the most surprising is how little you actually know about the practice of law after finishing law school. Law school, you learn all the tools, but of how to read case law, how to analyze the case law, how to get what the rule is from a case, how to read a statute. It's hard to actually figure out what it is to practice law. Like even now, even a little more than 6 months in, I'm still having to learn stuff just about every day on how to do what seemingly may seem like simple things, but stuff that I've never ran across before in law school. So I guess the most surprising is how little I knew even after a 3 year law school program on how to practice law.
Do you think I know a lot of, and we're going to talk about AI in future episodes, but what you just said kind of sparked this in my head. Do you feel like even though people say AI can't replace lawyers in the courtroom and the services that they provide, I almost feel like everything AI is good at is good at the law school portion of the career. Like everything that we were required to do in law school, AI is capable of doing, but everything that we're required to do in practice, AI would never be able to do.
That like there's obviously going to be problems with AI with all the cases going on about about Chat GPT hallucinating cases that never even existed. Even sometimes they're not actually their interpretation of a case law may not be exactly right, but AI can't interact with the client and do the counseling aspect of what being an attorney has to do. Like you've got I feel like I do a lot more counseling when I'm face to face with the client than advising them of the law because sometimes that's just what they need. They need someone who's here to listen to them, to talk to them, help them through what's going to be a difficult time of their life. And you've got to sprinkle in the legal aspect, but they want someone there with them to counsel them through this difficult time more so than just throw the legal facts like this is the case law, this is how it's going to be applied to this case, this is how the judge is going to rule on this. Like that stuff's important, but if you're unable to counsel, then it'll be hard for a client to have that confidence in you, in what I've learned so far.
Yeah. Well, have you ever used ChatGPT's like speaking feature where you're not typing, you're just like talking to it?
I'm not. Is it
You should
accurate?
do it's it's fun to do. And if you can't afford a therapist, then it beats like, just bottling up your emotions. But it does listen, but it is very Chat GPT um in its responses. Like you could pour out your heart to it and it'd be like, I'm really sorry that you're going through this. You feel um or all of your feelings are valid, and I know that it can be difficult to experience. Like it just is, it is reaffirming, but sometimes people don't need to be reaffirmed. Sometimes they do need someone to push back against them. But we'll I don't want to get too much into the AI discussion because we're gonna have a whole podcast on that in the near future. All right, what is your last question?
For you, let's go with why most people negotiate from fear.
Oh, God, that's a big topic, and I'll preface it by saying that I don't necessarily think negotiating from fear is always a bad thing. And when I say that, I mean, if you're negotiating from fear, that means that you are acknowledging you have something to lose, and in some cases, you have everything to lose. And so fear is oftentimes that rational voice in the back of your head that is reminding you to stay humble and not get greedy in your negotiations. It's fear is the great equalizer, for lack of better words. And I think it's important when you are negotiating to realize what's at stake, and that, let's say the perfect outcome is 50-50. You, whether this is legal or not, you and your spouse or you and whoever you're negotiating with um, would like to end up 50-50. Fear is the silent reminder of, you could lose everything if you were to take this to court, or if it's not legal, if you take it to arbitration, or um, if you let a judge decide for you, the worst case scenario is that you end up with nothing, But if even if it's not, even if the goal isn't 50-50, Um, there's a lot of cases where what you can negotiate for yourself is 1,000 times better than what a judge is gonna give you, and so I always tell clients and people that it's better to be the captain of your own fate and try to negotiate this than to take it to court and put it in the hands of someone who is a complete and total stranger to you. Like, why would you do that? Why would you let a judge decide how often you get to see your kids, or who's gonna get to keep the house, or you know, all these different aspects? I think keeping a healthy amount of fear in the back of your mind leads to the best possible scenario. Even if it's not 100% ideal, it's a lot better than losing everything potentially. I'm having trouble articulating exactly what I'm trying to say, but does that make sense, Austin?
Yeah, one thing that you said that's something I found myself saying to people pretty often is like usually before an upcoming court date, I'll have a meeting with one of my clients, and it's almost universal that they're nervous about the upcoming court date. And I always try to take note of that and let them know if you weren't worried, if you weren't nervous, then I would be worried about you because if you were just excited for this, if you were looking forward to this, if you're confident in this, then I think your priorities may be in the same place. You're looking for the conflict. You're not worried about what the best case for your child may be for this. So it's I kind of come up with trying to let them know this nervousness is good. This nervousness is what we expect because the courtroom as a whole is just the whole procedure. It's unknown to a lot of people unless they see it on TV. So just that whole aspect of a court scenario is nerve wracking to people. That could be where the fear comes from. But if they weren't fearful, then I would be concerned because they don't understand what is at stake. So that's
Yeah,
one thing your answer
I
kind of
think I
made.
think that I think that summarizes pretty much everything I was trying to say, um, a lot more succinctly than I said it. But all right, my last question for you: what do people completely misunderstand about lawyers?
What do people completely misunderstand about lawyers? That's a tough one. What do
I
people?
think it, I think it's tough in the sense of there's a lot of things that people misunderstand about lawyers, because if you've never had to hire a lawyer, then your only experience with lawyers is probably what Austin mentioned earlier, like Harvey Specter in Suits or Saul Goodman in Better Call Saul. Um, you know, at some point or another in your life, most people end up needing to get an attorney, but until you do get one, your thoughts on them are going to be shaped by popular culture.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's hard to see through my clients' eyes when they come in here. I don't know what they're expecting sometimes. I know sometimes they're wanting that bulldog, and I'm much more of someone like I obviously in disagreements we've had, I can get after somebody, but also I'm much more wanting to work with somebody and just be the more level headed person in a scenario, be the reasonable one. I'm not out there trying to yell at someone, degrade someone. So I guess that's one thing that's misunderstood is people think the only way to be a good attorney is to go out there and be that person that's the bulldog and bullies a client on the stand or forces someone into an agreement that they don't want to be. And I don't, in my eyes, that's not what a good attorney is.
Yeah. Yeah, in my opinion, you want an attorney because you want someone that can take the emotion out of the scenario or out of the facts and be, neutral, and can tell you what the weaknesses of your case are, help you work on those weaknesses, and present them, in a way that's favorable towards your own case. Um, but, if you're someone who finds yourself wanting the stereotypical bulldog, going to trial is not the be all end all. And like I said in my prior response, sometimes going to trial is the worst case scenario because you could potentially lose everything. And so why would you want to go to trial in that situation? Why not negotiate? Um, but if you find yourself hiring a bulldog attorney who only knows how to take things to trial and doesn't have any sort of negotiating skills, then then your case is probably in danger. Because like I said, you could lose everything when it ends up in the judge's or the jury's hands to make a decision. So
And based off the things that you just said, it reminded me of another thing that maybe clients may misunderstand is we're not just here to try and like skirt around areas of the law, like find all the secret loopholes. Like that's not what we're doing. And sometimes that's what they're expecting is, well, I know I did this, but what's the way you can kind of frame it and skirt around it, find a legal loophole or whatever it is, like they may see on TV. That's
yeah,
never
well,
be a legal loophole, especially in our area.
yeah. I mean, it's it's hard enough in some cases, and this is not directed toward any one official of the court. Um, but there are some judges who it's difficult enough already as it is to get the judge to follow the law, to follow the actual statute that has been drafted and passed by legislature, and trying to get a judge on board to agree with you with some loophole that you found, although on paper it sounds like it might work. It ain't gonna work if if the judge isn't willing to go along with it. So, um, like, paper doesn't bleed, and whatever theory or argument you can come up with, it might be a great theory or argument, but that doesn't mean that anyone's gonna agree with you when you get in court.
I 100% agree with that. What are your thoughts on me ending us with a quote? The quote that I brought up about every single day of this week to fire us up.
You got to give the podcast context about where the quote comes from, and then it'll hit that much harder.
Well, it's from the new HBO Max series, a, a Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It's a spinoff of Game of Thrones, and I don't want to I don't want to ruin the episode for anyone that hasn't seen it. But there's just a quote that earlier this week, I think Devin and I both just happened to have like a down in the dumps day. And then I thought of this. I'm like, damn, that just kind of reframed how I'm thinking about this.
Yeah,
But the quote,
can you share the quote as it is in the episode, and then share how you reframed it?
yeah. So the quote is, I do not know why tragedy so often falls after honorable men, but when I find myself without the answer is always more glory. And how I reframed it is, I can't remember exactly what I sent you, Devin. I was like,
Have
whenever,
it. I actually screenshotted it because it fired me up so much. So I'll actually just go into my camera roll and pull it up. You had said, "Why do the toughest cases trouble the newest attorneys? Only answer I can think of: more glory."
yeah. I mean, when I'm reframing it, it makes me think what a burden it is to be viewed as someone that's competent and able to do a job well. The hardest problems, the hardest issues, they're a chance for you to try and prove yourself, show yourself competent, show yourself worthy. Like that's honestly got me through this week is anytime I've had something like, dang, I don't have motivation for this. I'm struggling with this. I know this is gonna suck to get through. This is tough to get around. I when I'm thinking of this quote, I'm like, this is a chance for me to prove myself. This is a chance for me to show not only myself but others. This is what I'm meant to do. So it's kind of like reshape my mind for the week, and I'm gonna try and use it moving forward.
Yeah, that's good. We should. I mean, I don't know how difficult it would be, but we should make a habit of closing with a quote every single time. And that reminds me of this quote that's trending on TikTok now. Austin doesn't have TikTok, so I don't know if it's on Instagram or not. But it's something to the effect of, "I used to pray for the same things that are a burden to me now," or I used to pray for the same things that I'm complaining about now. Uh, it's so easy oftentimes to forget about where we started or where we once were and the things that we were aspiring to be. And in life, it's so easy to always be focused on the next thing, the next step. Um, that sometimes you just have to step back and realize like how much you've accomplished and how far you've already come, and that's kind of the secret art of gratitude that I've not mastered. I don't want to speak for Austin, but is difficult to uh step back and see a lot of the times.
I agree, especially on the everyday, day-to-day basis. You get lost in it sometimes.
So this is the official end of episode 1 of the Hybrid Attorney podcast. Next week, the topic of discussion will be productivity and workflow, something that will be applicable to a much larger audience than people that are just attorneys, people that work a desk job, people that work in retail, that work in the service industry. Productivity is one of the most important skills any person can have in life, and being able to manage their time wisely. So our current schedule is we will be filming these podcasts on Friday with the intent of releasing them on Mondays. So we will see you next Monday.